Hey guys, Keith here. Um, I thought I would spend a little bit of time going through what's new in 2018.7. It's been a little longer than usual. We've been doing a transition over to a new version of WX widgets, most of which you won't actually see, but it just helps us keep up to date, get some bug fixes and the like. We've also upgraded compiler versions and a whole bunch of other tool sets. And so it's taken a little bit longer to get that sorted. So I want to go through some of these enhancements here that have come in this release, and I'll start off with Kevin's display of video when sequencing. So some of you may realize that you can actually use a video file as actually the music track for a song. And so here I'm using one that someone sent me at some point for some reason. We'll just create a sequence with that. And so, as usual, you get the audio track up here, which it rips out of the video. What Kevin's done is he's added a new window type up here called sequence video. Now, this sequence video won't play when you're playing the show. It's just here for the purposes of helping you sequence. So it becomes an aid to your sequencing. And if I come over here and start playing the sequence, it will actually show the video file from the audio track. Now you can't show any other video here. It's only going to show the video that sits behind this audio track. So if you want to line up your sequence, this is obviously very golden. Maybe you want to use, you're using the video on your garage or something and you want to make sure that your sequencing is in sympathy with the video that's playing. You can do that. So it just tries to make that a little bit easier. You don't have to show it, you can close it down, it's not required, but if you find it easier to sequence with knowledge of what the video looks like while you're sequencing, it should be a great aid. So that's that one. We talked about WX widgets, we'll skip over that. Reworking the test dialogues. There's a number of changes I've made to the test dialogue. I hope I haven't broken anything. The test dialog used to look a little bit different to this. It used to only have one tree and you'd have to scroll down. Here it's your controllers, and so you have each here your outputs listed here. And if you scroll down a bit, you used to get to your model groups, and then even further down you would get to your models. Instead, what I've done now is I've actually separated them out into 3 separate tabs, and I've also actually reduce the amount of loading that goes on when you first open it. So I'm hoping that this will mean that people with even the largest shows will be able to take advantage of the test dialog. And you can just flick between them, and you can choose your models, you can choose your model groups and so forth. Within here, you can still drill down to the individual channel level and set those things. But as you can see, it's really quite snappy, and those things are being added just as you click on them. Other things that I've introduced, sorry, I have to find something. Let me find my faces here. So this outline is actually a submodel. So submodels are now options that you can select here. So if I wanted to test just the outline on my face, I can just check on that box there. And if I come back to outputs, you'll see that it has correctly selected a subset of the channels on one universe, which is where those things are at. On here, you can see your model groups, and you can drill down just to the model level. You can't go any lower than that there. So this here lets you drill down to obviously to your models and your nodes. In some cases, I think it lets you go down to the strands. No, it doesn't. It just goes to the node level immediately. And within that, you can go down to the channel. So we don't go to strands, we go straight to nodes. Anyway, so as you can see, it's actually quite snappy, even though my show's quite large. There's no lag or anything waiting for it to come up. The other change that I've made is I've added this checkbox up here called Don't Send Data to Unused Outputs. And if you happen to select that box when you're in test mode, it will only send the outputs to the ones that are selected. So in this case, it would only send data to universe 234. no other universes would have any data sent. So you'll get a very low number of packets going over your network. So if you're testing this on your home network, and you don't normally run it on your home network because it kills your home network, when you test here, it will only send this universe. Now, it won't just send the selected channels. It will send this entire universe, but only that universe goes out if you select that box there. If you unselect it, it sends the data to everything. So just like test mode used to do, it will blast your network with all that traffic. So yeah, a couple of changes there to the test tab. Yep. Okay, what else have we got here? So what else we've got here is on setup. I'll go to something that's a little bit more common. Let me add a null output. So with null outputs, normally you just define the number of channels and you give it a description. I've now added this new field called an ID field. Now the ID field doesn't mean anything in particular, but read it like it's a universe number. And if I can make this number absolutely unique, so let's make it a number that's an illegal universe number. So universe numbers only go up to 64,000. So let's make it 64,500. And you'll see that at the bottom here where it's now added it, oh, actually it doesn't show it, but it is actually universe 64,500. You can see that I've done the same thing with the DDP outputs, and you can do the same thing with all of your E131 outputs as well. So it's given it this unique universe number hidden behind the scenes. And what that means, if I come to my layout here and I add something like, let's just quickly add a star. When it comes to defining the start channel here, I can say, actually, that's on universe 64,500 start channel 1. And if I come here and I look at this up here, bring up the tooltip, we'll go back. You can see that, yes, it maps to my null channel 1, right? 57567. Was it 57567? And here it is, 57567. So this allows you to use universe start channel, although in this case it's not really a universe number, it's one of these unique IDs, as a unique way to reference nulls and law channels and your other USB type channels, as well as the DDP channels. A great way to make those things much easier to use, and avoiding getting into the situation where you had to resort to absolute or the output start channel. Hopefully that'll make it much easier to move those things around and manage your channel layout. So that's new as well in this time. Emojis and the shape effect. Now, I'm not going to go into this because, to be honest, I've already done this. There was a video I put out a couple of weeks ago where I teased you with that, and nothing there's materially changed, so I'll leave that alone. Enhance the ability to control the order in which the X, Y, and Z plus zoom, roto-zoom translations are applied. So what the hell does that mean? So let's go and quickly create an animation. Let's go down to my matrix. Did I find my matrix? I go one too far. There it is, there's my matrix. So let's go there, let's grab a shape effect. We'll put a shape effect on there. What we're going to do is we're going to set it to 0 growth. We're not going to make it in a random location. We're going to make the start size, I don't know, 15, a little bit big, maybe 10. Yeah, that'll do. All right, so now we've got a circle that happens to be changing color. So let's apply some roto-zoom onto that. So where's roto-zoom? Roto-zoom's hiding up here. Okay, so let's just do some simple roto-zoom. So the Z rotation, to be honest, is not going to do a great deal, right? It just rotates it around. Now, obviously, this went off the screen, and so consequently, it's chopped off. If I really wanted to, I could come into here and make that oversize, then go back to roto zoom and rotate it. And you can see now it doesn't chop it off. So that's good. But I can also come into here and give it some X rotation, right? And I can even give it some Y rotation. like that. But now there is an extra, and I have to fix this scroll here, where you get to decide which order they get applied in. So at the moment it's doing the X rotation, the Y rotation, then the Z rotation, but you can move it to any combination thereof, and you will find that it will actually result in slightly different results. Some of them do at any rate. So now you have the ability to choose the order in which the rotations apply, and that lets you achieve some outcomes that were otherwise not possible. If I leave the Z rotation to left, I can get it on an angle like that, which would not otherwise have been possible, because otherwise it always applied the Z rotation first. Anyway, so that's what that one's all about. You can choose the order it gets done. Enhanced mapping lots of channels sequentially. Okay, so this is predominantly useful when you're doing importing of LMS sequences. So if I go up to my desktop, I think I have an LMS folder here. Have any LMS files? I have one. Can't have just one. Let me go down here. xLights development. LMS. Oh, there we go. There's a bunch of LMS files. I have no idea who provided them to me, but anyway. Oh, no, that's not good. Okay, wasn't expecting that. Okay, well, that's something I can go back and test a little bit later. All right, let's go back and create another one. All right, import effects. Well, we won't do that one because we know that one crashes. Let's just do Amazing Grace. I know this one works because I think this is the one I was testing with. Okay, so here we've got a whole bunch of channels here. These are probably RGB or something that someone had, and they'd sequenced in their show. So previously, it's been really hard to bring these things in. I was watching a video the other day, and I thought, you know what, I could actually make this a lot easier. So let's imagine. Let me find an element here. A driveway arch sounds good. So here, let's imagine that I'm going to map each one of these to a node level. So what I can do is I can click on that node, and I can click over here, and I can double click on it. And if I double click on it, it maps it and automatically moves to the next. But really coolly, I can now just press the Enter key, and each time I press the Enter key, it maps a node across. And so on down. And I'm not sure why I didn't update the fact that all those channels are used, because they are. But yeah, so it now becomes a lot easier to do the mapping without having to keep on dragging things backwards and forwards if you're mapping lots of channels sequentially over here. So that's what that's all about. Are you sure I don't? Yep. Okay. Add a spectrogram peak to VU meter. Okay, so we're going to have to go back and discard that. And we're going to have to create an audio file. Do I have any music there? I don't. I might have some Christmas music here somewhere. I don't know. Does it really matter? Doesn't really, does it? Okay, again, we'll scroll down and we'll find my matrix, and we'll throw the VU meter on in an interesting part of the song. This beginning part looks somewhat interesting. Okay, and you're all familiar with the old spectrogram, which looks like that. We can increase the number of bars, which creates more of them, and you can see it's quite a bit diverse. It's obviously not getting up. Oh, there it goes. It gets up pretty high. So the first thing you'll notice is that it's only loading the first color. If you wanted to use the red, you actually have to choose a third color. Actually, I should probably fix that on Spectrogram because it's actually meant to apply primarily for the new mode that I have there, which is this Spectrogram peak. So what the Spectrogram peak does is it gives you peak bars which do eventually fall back down. Now it's actually controlled by this sensitivity here. So if you set that sensitivity to a reasonably low level, you've now got bars that will fall down as the song goes along. Much like a graphics equalizer with a peak bar used to do. So it will hold up there for about, in this case, it will hold up there for 10 frames, and then it will start to slowly fall back down to wherever the bar was. So you get to see the peaks. Yeah, a slightly different mode. And you can obviously change the color. If I want the thing to be blue, I can make it blue. If I want it to be white, I'd have to, whoops, not that way. I have to go in here and make that white. And that would turn the peaks to white. Make it red with white peaks. All good. So yeah, a slightly new style of spectrogram and a few things that maybe I need to look at. Provide an easy way to replace a model without breaking all the groups. All right. So let's imagine that this star here died and I need to replace it. It's currently called star. Okay, so what would I need to do? So let's imagine this is my new star. Now, if I want to replace this star and I want all the sequencing to stay the same, then obviously star 2 needs to become star, but I can't change star 2 to become star because star already exists. But the problem is if I rename this star to, or just delete this star, it will actually remove the star or change the name of the star in all of the groups that the star happens to belong to, which kind of leaves you in this sort of dilemma where, what the hell am I going to do here? So I've tried to give you a way for you to do this. So the first thing you want to do is you want to copy across any settings that are relevant. So let's imagine this start channel here is going to be the same start channel here. So I'm going to copy that across. Other than that, everything's okay. That star's now a perfect replacement for this star here. So I can now come up to this model here, right click on it and say, replace a model with this model. So it comes up, gives me a list. I go down and find the star. Where's the star here? There it is there. That's the model I want to replace with this star. So if I click OK, that star disappears, it gets deleted, and now this model here is called star. But even cooler, when I come up here to one of my groups here that happens to contain that star, and click on it, you can see that all my stars also include this star. So none of my groups have been broken. When I load my sequences, all of my sequences will load correctly with that sequencing that was applied to the old star applied to this new star. And I don't have to go through and fiddle with things and redo things and re-add everything to groups. It's just a simple one-for-one swap. Where this comes from is, to be honest, these things down here, this is my blow-up Santa Claus. I actually want to use the image model and replace him with a blow-up Santa Claus. But when I go and create the blow-up Santa Claus, I can't replace him without ripping him out of all the groups, and that was frustrating me. So that's why I added that feature. So that's the changes to xLights. There's a couple of other changes, but these are in the scheduler. Just a couple of little things. So the first one in the events, there's now a new event source. Sorry, it takes a little while because it goes out and tries to find a bunch of devices. So there's now a MIDI device that you can listen to. This would be populated with any MIDI devices that were plugged into your computer, like keyboards or whatever else. And then there are a bunch of different types of signals you can get. There's channels and data, and you can trigger off those, or you can use that data over here. If you run that over there, you can see that you can get that value, the channel value, which is, I think it's this value here. I think that's right. Yep. So you can use those values. Look, if you go back and look at my previous event video, you'll see how it all works. It's all pretty straightforward. But yeah, so now you can use MIDI keyboards and the like to control events in your show, kick off songs, or, you know, I've got a keyboard with a volume knob on it and I can have that volume knob plugged into my computer and turn the volume up and down. on my sequence rather than coming up here and fiddling with the buttons on the screen if I so wanted to. So that's MIDI. What else have we got here? I'll go past that one. I'll come back to that one in a second. Add a sustain output process. Okay, so this is a little bit odd. This is an output processor for those that haven't seen these before. These things are kind of like last minute modifications to the data stream that the scheduler can do just before the data gets written out to your controllers. And it gives you a whole bunch of capabilities that I've covered before to manipulate the data. You can do things like you can set gamma at this level before it gets written out. You can remap channels to other things. You can change the color order of channels on the fly. So if your controller doesn't support color reordering, you can do it here in the scheduler as it plays. You can choose to dim sections of your show and so forth. So the sustain one is here. And what the sustain lets you do is basically you get to choose a channel. Again, as usual, you can say, Universe 31 start channel 1, and you can specify here one or more channels that you want to effectively sustain. And where this comes from is when you're using moving heads. So when you're using moving heads, you have a DMX model on there and you're saying, I'll move the head this way and move the head that way. And when you're finished sequencing that moving head running around, you basically often will stop the DMX effect. But the problem with stopping the DMX effect is xLights will start to send zeros out to that DMX channel. And so the head will typically return to its default position wherever that happens to be. And sometimes that's not really what you want it to do. What you instead want it to do is to actually hold its position until you drop your next effect on it, and then it goes off and does something else. Now, you may not want to do it on every channel. You probably don't want to do it on the color channel, but you probably want to do it on your pan and your tilt and the like. And so you can specify here either one channel at a time, or if those channels happen to be all in sequence, you can say, hey, those 3 channels are the channels that I want to sustain. So what that will do is whenever those values drop to 0, what xSchedule will do is it will say, actually, no, I'm not going to send it to 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep repeating the last value that was not 0 and keep sending that out to that particular, on that particular channel. And so in that case, as your moving head's moving around, you get to the end of the DMX effect, it starts to send 0, and then this thing will kick in and say, actually, no, I'm not going to send zeros. I'm going to send the last value that the DMX effect had set, and I'm going to hold that head in its position. And then when you get to the next DMX effect and you start setting things to a different value, off it goes. Now, the thing, of course, to remember is if you do legitimately want it to set to 0, you can't. What you can do, however, is you can get it down to 1, which is obviously pretty close to 0 and probably not necessarily noticeable on a moving head. But it's a way to sustain a channel's value and avoid it going to 0 if that's what you so want. xSchedule to an event, add xSchedule to an event playlist. This is an extra list of simultaneously running playlists. So as I was looking at all of this event handling, events are all well and good, and it's great to be able to kick off a sequence or play a song or whatever as a result of an event occurring. But if you're doing a Halloween show and you want to have I don't know, your fogger go off when someone trips an infrared beam, or when you want, I don't know, some soundtrack to play when someone does something else. You don't really just want one thing to play at a time. You actually want lots of things to play at a time, and all in response to events going off. And the scheduler really didn't provide a good way of doing that. And so this here introduces that capability. And the way you exploit it, I'm going to show it with some events. So what I've done is I've created a playlist here, and it's got 3 steps in it. Each step happens to be a video. So let's go into it. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to play a video onto the screen in slightly different places on the screen when those events are triggered. And I'm going to trigger those events, to be honest. I'm just going to use these buttons down here, but you could trigger it off any external event. So any of those event sources that we saw, give it a second, thinking music, and up it comes. So any of these possible event sources, whether it's a MIDI key getting pressed, a LAW channel being received, an ArtNet packet arriving with a particular channel at a particular value, an FPP event being fired, an OSC event being fired, some serial data arriving, which would typically be DMX. Oh, sorry, the LAW one is an input PUP. Probably something that most people use it for, or even you know, a particular channel value inside the sequence you're playing, or an E131 event, i.e. listen to a piece of E131 data from another location, and you can come over here and you can choose one of these events down here, these three at the bottom here, which are these events which play a single step. Okay, and there's three of them. There's play a step, and that will play the step as many times as the event occurs. So if the event gets fired 5 times, whatever that step is will actually get triggered 5 times and all play at once, which may not be what you want. So then you've got run this event playlist step unique. And what this will do is it will guarantee that only one step in the playlist that is chosen is being played at any one point in time. So if you fire the second event, the first event will actually stop and be replaced by the second event. And this last one, this run event playlist step if idle, this is similar to this. It guarantees that only one thing will be running, but instead of cancelling the first event and replacing it with the new one, this one here will actually refuse to run the second event until the first event is finished. And so I was thinking the way I could use this is I could put a button out the front of my house which people could press to call up my virtual Santa. And if they press it again and the Santa's already playing, clearly I don't want the video to go back to the beginning and replay again. That would look really odd. Well, instead, what I wanted to do is ignore it until the video is finished. And then if they press the button again, I want Santa to come back and go through his sequence. So that's where I would use a run event playlist step if idle. And I'm definitely contemplating doing that this year, providing that magic button that people can press and call up virtual Santa. So what does it look like? Well, I showed you I've got this event playlist and I've got these 3 steps. And so what I've done is I've created these 3 buttons. So let me quickly show you what these 3 buttons look like. Sorry, it's in options. As you know, these are all my keyboard commands here. Sorry, all my button commands here. And so here's button 1. Button 1 runs that event playlist step. It goes to the events playlist and it plays step 1. Number 2 plays step 2. And 3 play step 3. Now notice it's the one which doesn't limit how many things play. So let's quickly take a look at that. So if I click this one here, a video pops up. If I click it again, actually a second video pops up, right? Because the button's been pressed twice. I click 3, a third video pops up. Okay, so that's how those events work and how these multiple things can be playing at once. Now, these things will overlay whatever sequence happens to be playing. They will always sit here as the highest priority. So you can sequence these things to play over the top of your other things in your show, but don't forget you're probably going to want to constrain the channels that they write data to, because otherwise it will blank out the rest of your show, which is probably not what you intend. So if we go back in here and we change these 3, let's change it to be play it uniquely. Let's change all of them to be that. And let's change the third one as well. Okay, so they're all good. Click OK. So now when we press 1, the first video plays. When we press 2, it stops and the second video plays. And the third one plays as well. That's a very short one. It goes for 3 seconds. So you can see how those buttons now have a slightly different behavior. And finally, just to show you how it works, we'll come in here and we'll make these if idle. If idle. Now, This is idle within the playlist. If I had another set of buttons which were pointing at another playlist, those events could still run concurrently. So the uniqueness or the idleness is only looked at within that particular playlist. So just so that's clear. So if I click on number 1 and I press number 2 and number 3, nothing happens because this video is playing, and those things will only play if there's nothing else playing from that particular playlist. So that's the enhancements for .7. A few things there that I'm hoping will, particularly this stuff, I'm hoping that will really make xSchedule a much better scheduler for people at Halloween and for those people who want more interactivity in their shows. I think it provides a significant extra dimension to what you can do. And there's a few other things up here which I think may enhance your sequencing. There are other big change, and I mentioned it in a post on the forum, but I'll mention it again here. We have removed a renderer event, which we felt was potentially causing an overly large amount of rendering to go on and was causing a little bit of lagginess within the UI. And possibly slowing down potentially even the overall rendering because it just kept on going. So we've removed that in this release. Now there's a chance that you may experience situations where xLights does not render perfectly and you have to press the render all button. We've added a bunch of logging, which is going to hurt performance a little bit, but we added the logging because now's the time of year where I'd really like to understand whereabouts rendering is not occurring properly, so that we can try and address that properly and render just when we need to render. So the logging is there to try and help us understand what happened. I'm mainly interested in people that can reproduce the behavior. And if you could grab your logs, go to the tools menu and select the package log files. Please don't choose package sequence. It doesn't include the log files. Please include package log files. And then we can take a poke around in those log files and see if we can tell why it didn't render in your particular example. Please do that fairly soon after you experience the problem. The log files, particularly if you're dragging effects around, are going to fill up pretty quickly and they'll roll over. And so we'll miss anything useful. So anyway, would appreciate your assistance. Thank you guys. Enjoy 2018.7. Thanks.